another top quarterback that was in the Heisman race, not seen as the top quarterback, but coming into it, when you look at the stats, he was the second best quarterback when it comes to yards, Michael Penix Jr. in Washington. So Jeff Supernah, you analyzed Michael Penix Jr. Tell us a little bit about what you saw from the Huskies quarterback.
I mean, being a Wisconsin guy and a state of Wisconsin guy, and Big Ten, sort of been in and around Michael Penix for a while, from his time in Indiana, and then obviously the prep leading up here. It's honestly, it was really enjoyable watching him play football for all of his time at Indiana. I don't want to say it was a wasted opportunity, but he had two ACL replacement or two ACL surgeries that cut seasons short. Arguably their best year was the COVID year. And so they only had 6 games, or I'm sorry, they only had 8 games, I believe it was. And he had I think it was a shoulder injury that kept him out of 2 of them. And so the potential was there. I mean, he's definitely a good quarterback. He's a gamer. The 2-point conversion against Penn State, I think that's kind of the iconic image of him, at least in my mind.
Penix steps up. Flush, Penix.
And then last year at Washington, he just freaking exploded. He threw for over 4,600 yards. Accuracy of just a shade over 65%, 31-8 touchdown to interception ratio. I really, like I said, I really like watching him. He has a nice quick release. The film that I saw, he kind of has multiple arm angles. He has a really good pocket presence. The one thing that, really impressed me, like I don't think he's gone a year without an injury that has led to him missing time. But there were also multiple shots of him, the stereotypical, as he's releasing, just like getting a chest or a shoulder right in the chest. I mean, he's not shying away from that. I gave him when I was looking through and rating, I gave him an 8 for accuracy. He had a couple of really nice shots into that cover 2, or like beating the safety in some of those cover 2 throws against Oregon. Actually, arm strength, I only gave him a 7. It's not that he doesn't have a strong arm. It just, I think quite honestly, the other quarterback I looked at, Bo Nix, has a cannon. And so it's not to say that Penix can't make all the throws. It's just, it wasn't quite as high for me. Decision making, about a 7.5. He is accurate. He looks like he reads coverage pretty well. There were, on some of his interceptions, like, breaking the pocket and looking to try and make something happen, just making bad decisions, trying to force something down a sideline. And I could probably bump that up. Pocket presence, I had already talked about that. I gave him a 9. Again, he's willing to stand in. He's willing to make that throw, even after, the injury history that he has. So athleticism was kind of, he's a good athlete. Like, he's not a bad runner. He doesn't run a lot. There are clips from his time at Washington last year of him, breaking the pocket, getting upfield, or some designed run stuff. But that being said, for his career, he has 257 rushing yards. So it's not that he's not a bad athlete. It's not that he can't manipulate the pocket, get outside, do what he has to do. It's just there's not as much purposeful running.
Some of that has to be, with his offensive line and his, like you said, his pocket presence. If that's something that he relies on, and only being sacked 5 times last year, I mean, credit has to go somewhere, right? And that's got to go to the offensive line and also his pocket presence, being able to get that ball out, right?
Yeah. And so going into this year too, Washington, even though they're airing it out, they did lose their top rusher. They have their next 2 rushers coming back, but combined, their rushing yardage was like 100 or so yards less than the top guy. They do have a couple of transfers coming in. But the big thing is his top 3 receivers are all coming back. Romeo Odunze, Jalen McMillan, and even Jalen Pope. They're all. Jalen Pope was the low man on that totem pole with 41 receptions at 694 yards. The other 2 were over 1,000. At least Odunze and McMillan are going to get some real hard NFL looks. And then their offensive line, they have both tackles coming back, and they need to replace the interior. There is some experience coming back with that, but it's still needing to solidify. So all in all, I really think that Penix could have a really big year. I think Washington could be good, and their schedule sets up pretty well for that too. Right out of the gate, they're hosting Boise State, and I don't. Boise State isn't quite the Chris Peterson led teams, but they're still by no means a pushover. But that game is in Seattle. After that, they're hosting Tulsa. Week 3, they're going to Michigan State, and so that's really the kind of the first big test that they have. So the Big Ten Conference gets an early preview with this, but I think that could be one that could really be kind of a good sounding board. After that, they're home against Cal. They're at Arizona. Then the big one, October 14th, they're playing Oregon, but it's a home game for Washington, and so I think that'll definitely help. They don't have to go to Autzen. Otherwise, they're home against Arizona State. They're at Stanford, which they should take. Assuming that they take care of business. I think they're going to be sitting with 1, maybe 2 losses, depending on how Michigan State comes into the year. And then they're going to USC, and they host Utah in back-to-back weeks. And I think again that will be kind of appointment TV viewing. Then they end the year at Oregon State, and those games in Corvallis never seem to be a pushover for anybody. And then ending the year with the Apple Cup. So all said and done, I think this schedule breaks down where Washington could have a pretty big year, and Penix is part of that too. My biggest question is, last year was the first year that he stayed healthy. I think he still has a bunch of potential. I think he could throw for 4,500 plus yards again, but it's will he be able to play in 13 games again? If that offensive line takes a little bit to solidify in the middle, that could lead to him, taking 1 or 2 more hits than he wants to. And given his injury history, who knows what could happen? I hope it doesn't. I hope he has a huge year. But yeah, it's just, can he stay healthy?
Yeah, 11-2 last year. The big losses came to UCLA and Arizona State, and as you mentioned, you never know what you're gonna get with Michigan State. Like, are they gonna be good? Are they gonna be bad? Like they were last year. They had some good games, but usually they're well coached. We'll see what kind of Michigan State program we see this year, and longevity and health. That's pretty much it. It's not just for him. Like, he does have a history of getting injured, but like his offensive line, if that starts going down, only being sacked 5 times. The 3 of you guys, you probably would love that if that was your final stat, only being sacked 5 times. You had an incredible season. You would know that for sure. But can that offensive line, kind of still be as good as it was last year? I don't know if they lost any seniors or anybody to the draft. And will the conference, looking at tape, know that he doesn't run a lot and he doesn't really kill you when he's out there? Like you said, he's athletic, but it's not like you can't run him down. Are they going to start blitzing him a little bit more, and can they pick that up? Be interesting to see, like, will the health of the entire team and him down the season, will that be able to help him put up the stats like he did last year? And if he does, I think he's a top candidate for the Heisman. Now we move on to the Heisman Trophy winner. We move on to Caleb Williams, a guy who, no doubt about his ability, no doubt about him being the Heisman winner. He was at Oklahoma, as mentioned, and he then went to USC, and they had an outstanding season. The only problem with last year when it came to winning it all was there was one guy or one team, was Utah. Utah was the thorn in Caleb Williams and USC's side, as they beat them twice. They beat them at Utah 43-42, so close game. And then they beat them in Vegas for the Pac-12 championship, where they got thumped 47-24. And then there was another loss. And we're not putting this all on Caleb Williams. He does not play defense, by the way. I don't know if you guys knew that, but then he lost to Michael Pratt. So those are good quarterbacks, good good teams that he's playing against. Well, I don't know. A lot of people were like Tulane, good team, but at that moment in that game, they play their hearts out. But playing in Utah, that's no easy task. Luckily for them this year, they won't have to play at Utah, but they will have to play Utah in the Coliseum. So Warren, take it away. It's a layup for you. I mean, there's not too much to dislike about Caleb Williams. He's going to be a top draft pick if his health is there, obviously. Tell us what you saw out of the 2022 Heisman quarterback, Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I mean, it really is hard to say anything bad about the guy. As the reigning Heisman winner, expect a lot coming into this season for him. The big question is going to be, can he do it twice? Can he join Archie Griffin as the only player to win the Heisman more than once? And we've seen other guys that win it and come back another year and have a little bit of a down year. He needs to make sure that he really stays focused and does what he knows how to do and trusts his athleticism, trusts the team around him to be able to continue to be just as successful as he was last year. Obviously, for him making the move from Oklahoma to USC, staying with Lincoln Riley was a big thing for him. Obviously, Lincoln Riley, he's figured out what it takes to coach a quarterback to winning a Heisman. This is his third Heisman quarterback in the last 5 or 6 years, which is really impressive. So I think he just needs to continue to do what he knows how to do. Looking at his stats from last year, throwing for over 4,500 yards, rushing for close to 400 yards. And really the stat that stands out the most to me is that he threw 42 touchdowns and only 5 interceptions. That to me is really impressive. And he threw the ball 500 times and to only have 5 interceptions means he's making good decisions. He's throwing the ball where he needs to throw it. And so, overall, he's making really incredible plays and doing a great job being very efficient as a quarterback. So, looking at initially just his accuracy level, I rated him an 8.9. And he completed 66.6% of his passes. And he really puts the ball where he needs to a lot of the time. There are certain times on deep balls where he does tend to underthrow receivers, and it's not for lack of arm strength. He's got an incredibly strong arm. And so it's just that, he needs to make sure he's got the right touch on all of his throws. He does a lot of what you see from a quarterback like Pat Mahomes. He'll throw off balance. He'll throw sidearm. He'll do all sorts of things like that. Gets the ball where it needs to be in the general area, but not necessarily always right on target. And then getting into arm strength, that I would rate at a 9.5. He's got as strong an arm as there is out there. He's also makes throws off his back foot at times, and just relies heavily on his arm strength to be able to fit the ball into tight locations and does it at a really successful clip. This is an example of a play. He's to show off his arm strength here. He can hit a guy way downfield. That's releasing it from inside the 20. So that's 50 yards in the air right on a dime. Jordan Madison, that was his top receiver from last year. So he was just drafted in the first round by the Minnesota Vikings. So that's going to be a guy that he needs to look to try to replace as a player out on the outside and a real deep threat for the Trojans. But the interesting thing is although Jordan Addison was his number one receiver, he didn't really throw to him that much more than 3 other guys. Jordan Addison had 875 yards receiving, and actually there were 3 other Trojan receivers that had over 600 yards receiving on the season. So Caleb Williams did spread the ball around. Caleb Williams' decision-making abilities, again, because he's completing a high percentage of his passes, and he threw such a small number of interceptions on the season. He's obviously making good decisions. So I rated his decision-making as an 8.9. The one knock on him from the decision-making perspective is he did take 30 sacks last year. So there are times where he tends to hold on the ball a little bit too long. He tries to utilize his athleticism a little bit too much from time to time, and it causes him to take sacks, which can be drive killers. So just wanted to show a quick play here, some good decision making from him. He reads the cover 2, so he hits the whole shot 20 yards down the field. A great throw, and tough tight window he's got to fit it into. From a pocket presence perspective, I rated him an 8.6. So this is So he does a great job feeling the pressure, avoiding it while he steps up and rolls slightly to the right there, keeping his eyes downfield, looking for the receiver downfield, makes a great throw. Really getting to the thing that has, I think, ultimately got him to winning the Heisman is just his overall athleticism. As a runner, he had under 400 yards rushing on the year, but because he does it a little bit more sparingly, and I think with the 30 sacks ultimately decreased his overall rush yard total some. But if you look at, here's an example of a play where it's a design, quarterback read option. He can run the ball, makes a couple guys miss, and ultimately just shows off what he can do with his legs, even though he's really more staying in the pocket or making plays when he's dropping back to pass versus design run plays. Athleticism, we rated him a 9.3. And again, he makes a lot of great plays with his legs. Great example of the athleticism he has. Makes a guy miss, makes the second guy miss, gets upfield. That's something you really can't coach a guy to do. That's just something he's making a play, doing a great job at. Caleb Williams this year, the big games that he really needs to focus on to really play well are early on in the season. They're going to be playing at home against Stanford on September 9th. It's going to be a night game, so late start on the West Coast will be really the only thing on for everybody to watch, and he needs to really have a good showing in that game, first conference game of the year, and prove that he's still on track and doing the same thing he'd done last year. And then towards the end of the season, there's going to be two really big matchups on October 14th. They're playing on the road at Notre Dame. It's going to be a good game to watch, and he's going to be playing against another strong quarterback. And then the following week on October 21st, they're playing Utah, and Steve, like you mentioned at the beginning here, he lost to Utah twice last year, and depending on how Rising's playing, it's going to be an incredible matchup between two quarterbacks that really know are really big gamers. Do what it takes to help their team win.
Yeah, you mentioned those games that are coming up. Another big stat that that people should know is that they were 7-0 in the Coliseum. Those games that they have, the big games that they have coming this year, there's 3 of them. It's Utah, Washington, and I guess UCLA, depending on who the quarterback's there. But those are all home. The big away games, Notre Dame and Oregon. So, Warren, you and I have been in the Coliseum, and we watched USC get waxed. I think it was like 3 years ago by Stanford. When they're down or they're losing, that stadium's so big. And with sports in LA, if something's not exciting or the team's not winning, it's pretty silent. You could tell that the fans aren't into it. So depending on how they do away is going to be the big thing. Obviously, they have a lot of horsepower at home against Utah. If they play well to start the game, keep the fans in the game, I think they're gonna have a pretty solid season and win the Pac-12. Now, Colorado is not a doormat anymore, I don't think. I don't know. They might still be a doormat, to tell you the truth, this year. But in the years coming, I don't think they will be. So I think that USC is going to have a great season. I think Caleb Williams might, like you said, might be the first person since Archie Griffin to win 2 Heisman trophies. And it's going to be 2 Heisman trophies in a row. The other people who had opportunities to do so, I guess you could say, were Tim Tebow, Matt Leinart had a chance to do it, and I think that might have been it when it comes to real chances to winning the Heisman Trophy off the top of my head. I know people are probably gonna say, "What about this guy? What about that guy?" But should be interesting to see these quarterbacks play out this 2023 season.
Williams has time against the 4-man rush, backpedaling, scanning, now running out of time, circling back, joystick on the move again. Are you kidding me? Caleb Williams dancing, cutting, mesmerizing run by the quarterback, finally dragged down at the 20. It's a highlight.
To do the Heisman pose after this play.